answering are the block ones.
Yeah, the unrestricted ones, and I got one from Freedom Path.
What about live calls?
I'm getting live calls too.
Mostly live calls?
Mostly robot.
Just one.
Asking me.
Very good. That's nice.
And they only
I
sit
see.
down.
Okay. Well, hey, let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking your delegate responsibilities seriously and going out and meeting with the candidates. And it was an honor to meet you the other day, and hopefully you have some more good questions for me today. And before you leave today, it's my hope and my goal that all of your questions are answered. What I'd like to do, though, over the next 10 minutes or so is just give you a brief introduction, and you'll just have to bear with it again. Maybe you'll pick something new up. And Ben, you'll just have to bear with it again as well. But that's okay. A brief introduction on who I am, my past, my history, what I've accomplished in the legislature, and what I hope to accomplish in Congress, and why I'm running for Congress. You see, that's a very important thing, because we have to have vision on what we are going to do when we're back there. And I think that by the time you leave here today, you're going to have a great idea on where I stand on the issues and why. Ultimately, by the end of this day, you're going to know who I am, you're going to know what my jobs plan is, you're going to know what my plan is to turn this economy around, you're going to have the answers to your questions, and you're going to find out why I believe I am most capable and ready to take on Jim Matheson. Let me give you a little bit of history. The last 5 years, I've served in the Utah legislature, and it's been a really, really good time. We've been involved in some of the most significant pieces of legislation, really in recent history. And I'm going to highlight some of those here in just a minute, but I want to take you back before I was in the legislature. I want to take you back to when I was not very politically active. 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I was working as a police officer. That's what I did. My career is law enforcement. I was the first SWAT team. I was on the first SWAT team in South Jordan. Was the first SWAT team leader that they had. Was the first canine officer for the city of South Jordan. And then I also worked for West Valley City. I was a detective. I taught DARE in the schools. Went in and taught the kids DARE to resist drugs and violence, and had a great career going. You know, I was working hard just to put food on the table and make ends meet and do what I could to support my family, and never paid much attention to politics. I voted every November, but that was it. I'll save you the boring details and just tell you briefly. One day I got a postcard in the mail, just a 5x7 postcard in the mail from a parental rights organization. And I am a staunch supporter of parental rights. I believe that you as parents, and parents in general, have the right to raise their children how they see fit. And the government should take a distant back seat when it comes to raising your children. And so I saw this postcard, and it's normally one of those things you just read and throw away. You're experiencing that now. Hopefully you're not throwing them away as delegates. But I did something that day that would change my life forever. I sat down at the table and I called the phone number on the postcard. And I asked the lady when she answered, I said, yeah, I got your postcard. I really agree with you. Do you happen to have a yard sign I could put in my yard? And she said, well, no, we don't have yard signs, but you could help us another way. I said, okay, well, how can I help you? And she said, you can go to your caucus meeting and get elected as a delegate. And I gotta tell you, 6 years ago, that's the first time in my adult life that I have ever remember hearing those two words. I had no idea what she was talking about. I said, so what's a delegate? What's a caucus meeting? And she explained it to me. And I said, well, geez, I got to tell you that the minute she explained that to me, it was like opening my eyes to the political process. I had no idea that when I was voting every November, I was missing 2/3 of the entire election process. And I said, well, I'm pretty well known in my neighborhood. I could go and get elected as a delegate. And she says, well, where do you live? I said, I live in Harriman. And she perks up and she says, really? You live in Harriman? I said, yeah. She says, well, did you know that your legislator is the most liberal Republican in the state? This is her talking. He is always voting for higher taxes, more regulation. He's always voting against parental rights and our issues. Like, have you ever thought of running for the legislature? And I said, lady, you just explained to me what a delegate was. Do I sound like anyone who has ever considered running for the legislature? And she says, well, would you? And I said, no, I called you to get a yard sign to put in my yard, not get recruited to run for the legislature. And she said, well, will you at least meet with me? And I said, oh, okay, I'll meet with you. And about a week or so later, I met with her at the IHOP in West Valley. And by this time, she's a great saleswoman. She says to me, we researched you. Researched me? And she said, yeah. You're a decorated police officer, and you know you're a good family man, good husband and father, and you're perfect for the legislature. And I said, boy, you are desperate, lady. You think I'm perfect for the legislature? You're desperate. You got the wrong guy. And she said, look, we really need someone to run against this guy. Would you be interested in doing it? And I said, look, I will file to run, but I'm not really going to run. You know, I'll give you a name. I'll throw a name out there, but that's it. She says, fine. So the filing day came, and I went down to Salt County Clerk's office and paid $15.80 or whatever it is to run for the legislature. It's not that expensive. I was really kind of surprised. 15 bucks, 16 bucks. And they'll put your name on the ballot. Well, I thought that was kind of cool. You know, I'm a candidate for the legislature. I'd never thought I'd be a candidate for anything. And I went home, and to be honest with you, I forgot about it because I had no money. I was a police officer. I knew nothing about politics. I had never run for office before. I never even knew another elected official. Politicians were just people on TV who were distant from me and people that I didn't really trust all that much. But then the phone started ringing, and people would start calling me. And they'd say, who are you? I say, well, I'm just a cop from Harriman. They say, okay, cop from Harriman, why are you running for the legislature? I said, well, look, I'm not really running. I just put my name out there out of protest of the status quo. They said, well, what's your platform? I said, well, I don't have a platform. I'm not really running for the legislature. They said, well, what do you believe? And I remember to this day the things that I told people as they would call me. And these are the things I would tell them. Sorry. I said, I believe in the goodness of America. I believe that this is the greatest country that has ever existed on the face of the earth. And that any one of us, you or I, can succeed if government will just get out of the way and allow us to succeed. I said, I believe that the founding fathers were divinely inspired men, and that they were raised up at that time to draft the Constitution, which I believe is divinely inspired. I said, I believe in the Bill of Rights, and particularly the Second Amendment and the 10th Amendment. I think the federal government has gotten too big. I said, I'm unapologetically pro-life. Those are the things I believe. And people said, we want to help you get elected. And so for the next couple of weeks, my wife and I, we spent a lot of time on our knees praying and thinking, and are we going to do this or not? And we decided, yep, I'm in. I'm going to do it. Now, I had no political experience, like I said, but the one thing I did have is I was born to great parents who taught me how to work. I was born into a military family. My father served in the 82nd Airborne Division. And my parents had 5 boys. Of the 5 boys, we have a sister. Never forget my sweet little sister. You know. Of the 5 boys, 3 of them are career military, and 2 of us are career law enforcement. My parents instilled in us from a very young age a deep love for God, family, and country. They also taught us how to work. And so when I decided to run for the legislature, I decided to put on my walking shoes, and I started knocking on doors, and I started calling people on the phone, and I started meeting with them one-on-one, 4, 5, 6 on one. We'd meet in libraries, we'd meet in homes, and in November of 2006, this cop from Harriman was elected to the legislature. And it was just a humbling experience. I gotta tell you, I never aspired to be anything more than a law enforcement officer. That's what I always wanted to be, was be a cop. I wanted to be a cop, have a good career. I wanted to be an honorable husband and a good father. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to be. And honestly, that's still the highest aspiration a person can have, in my opinion. But I never in a million years thought I'd be involved in politics. And it was a little bit intimidating because I went in one day from being a cop to representing 70,000 people. Well, I gotta tell you, I put myself to work, I got good mentors, I started learning, and we've been involved in some very, very important pieces of legislation. Let me just highlight a couple for you. One of the things that led me to run for politics, you know, that 2-week period of time when I was thinking, should I run, should I run? The thing that really pushed me over the edge was something I was dealing with in law enforcement. I had a chance or an opportunity to spend some time as a detective, and I had investigated some child sex crimes. And I really hated the revolving door that we had at the prison here in the state. People would commit brutal child sex offenses just to get out in 3 years and do it again. That had to stop. And I thought, if I could just change that one thing, I will have made a difference for this state. So my first term in office, the first 2 years that I was in office, I sponsored and passed a law called Jessica's Law, the Jessica Lunsford Act. And what it is, it moved Utah from being essentially the bottom, the weakest state in the nation on child predators, to being one of the strongest. Gone are the days of a child predator, a sex offender, spending 3 years in prison. No, now today, the penalty for rape of a child is a minimum mandatory 25 years to life in prison, and life without any possibility of parole on a second offense. We jumped our penalties and moved our penalties. We went from down at the bottom to the top in my first term. And had I quit the legislature at that point, I would have been satisfied because I did something that I felt made a real difference for families and for people. But I ran for re-election because there was a series of things coming. That we had the housing crisis, we had the economy collapsing, and we had government scrambling to raise taxes, and I just wanted to be there in that fight to help protect my constituents' pocketbook. Because government, it's simple. When the economy's bad, what you have to do is you have to go get another job or you have to cut back on spending. Government all too often defaults to raising your taxes and taking more money from you, and I think that's a bad thing. So I ran for re-election and I won. If you look over the last 5 years, if there has been a conservative fight in the state legislature in the state of Utah, there is a good chance that I have been at the forefront of that battle. Whether it's the fight to reclaim our sovereign lands from the federal government, the fight to push back against Obamacare, which I'll talk about in a second, the fight to keep taxes low, the fight to prohibit labor unions from coming in and taking over companies. Whatever the case may be, the right to life issues, the Second Amendment issues, a broad spectrum of conservative issues, I have been at the forefront of those issues and fighting for those issues. I have a proven, verifiable record. And that's something that I think I would like to ask you to look into as you're making a decision here. Who has the proven, verifiable record in this race? I want to tell you about one other piece of legislation that I believe is the crown jewel of my time in the legislature. And we're dealing with it this week. Monday began the oral arguments against Obamacare. But what you may not know is the story behind the story. In 2010, Congress was threatening to pass Obamacare. And I'm the co-founder and the first chairman of an organization called the Patrick Henry Caucus. It's now a national organization, but it was founded right here in Harriman, in my home, and in the home of Ken Sumption in American Fork. It's dedicated to